Boredom is a reason for a person to do something more than just satisfy physical needs. It's a metaphysical reason for metaphysical strives, movements, thoughts, and it's a very important and significant thesis by Benno Hübner. Benno Hübner was a German philosopher of 20th century. He was a researcher of this phenomenon of boredom, and he was aesthetician and philosopher of art. So hello and welcome back to this channel, and I would like to talk a little bit about this phenomenon of boredom. And of course, the issue of boredom isn't something new at all. Although this phenomenon in the 20th century has become much broader and one might say democratized, democratized. And if you look at it in retrospective way, boredom wasn't always treated negatively. Of course, its presence not so pleasant, not so nice for human being, and that's why it's very valuable. It's worth it to feel this boredom. Only a person for some reason has the opportunity and ability to be bored. Only human being has this ability. It's impossible to feel boredom for any kind of living beings, for animals or plants, of course. Christian ascetics, monks, and theologians wrote about this, calling boredom a midday demon, a temptation caused by pure, unfilled time. The monk and Christian theologian Johann Cassian the Roman, an early Christian ascetic and monk and theologian, describes this state as follows. The hermit suddenly begins to be tormented by doubts that he cannot be saved, that it's worth leaving the cell, the monk cell, feels an extreme weakening of the body and hunger, as if he's tired after a long journey or long hard work, or has endured many hours of hard labor, and so on and so forth. And the ascetic begins to look around restlessly, sighs, often goes out, then enters the monk cell again, and it was very painful anxiety for him. Thus, Johann Cassian sums up, in such an unreasonable confusion of the spirit, as if the earth was covered with darkness, he remains idle, not engaged in any spiritual work, and thinks that nothing can be a remedy for such a misfortune except visiting some brothers or comforting with sleep. So it's the sketch from his text, this Bishop of Aptus. And what is the practice of meditation, by the way, in Buddhist monasteries? Peering into boredom, absolutely peering into and into the futility of vanity, peering into nothing, into nothingness. This nothingness was very significant concept for Heidegger, for Sartre, by the way, and for Christian mystics. Moreover, daily life in the monastic way is an endless repetition of the same actions. A very early rise, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 3.5 hours in the morning, the same tea, always the same tea, always the same time, prayer practices, meditations, and everything is very measured, very ordinary in their life. And you can't get away from boredom. It's impossible, which in this case is right in front of you. It's just the matter of fact, this boredom, and you should see strictly on it. And you can't get away. You meet this phenomenon courageously every day, absolutely every day, without distractions and entertainments, without social media, of course, posters and notifications of our messengers and so on and so forth. And it's really hard. It can be really hard. Joseph Brodsky, it was the famous Russian writer and poet Joseph Brodsky, in his famous praise of boredom, talks about that inevitable mechanics of repetition, which is life in itself. This mechanics of repetition is pure life. Boredom is, so to speak, your window on time. You can feel this time thanks to this boredom. And on those properties of it that we tend to ignore to such an extent that it already threatens our mental balance. The comparison of Brodsky, comparison of a drug addict with a heroin needle and a fan of clip videos, points directly to nowadays, to this time, to today. Well, of course, to be honest, I personally stick to cats videos or makeups videos and so on and so forth, because their redundancy of time and the feeling of one's own insignificance really want to score something as soon as possible, drown it out and feel it. However, Brodsky, following ascetics and novices of monasteries, advises to indulge in boredom and let this boredom come in. Hug this feel so stuffy and so muddy and so terrible, but so worthy for us. Arrange your own picnic on the sidelines of time. Picnic of the sidelines is the roman of brothers Strugatsky, Russian writers. Picnic on the sidelines of time, which a full sense of your own finiteness and incomprehensibility. What to do with this strange artifact called I, called me, which is abandoned in the zone, in the sphere of nowadays and doesn't understand the destination. Martin Heidegger considered the phenomenon of boredom to be the starting point for discovering oneself and one's true being, this Dasein, here being. Moreover, awareness of it can also come as a memory. For example, it's example of Martin Heidegger himself. After a tiring working day, you were invited to visit some guests, your relatives or something like this, and you are anticipating, you are happy, but directly at a party, you fall into a kind of numb, drowsy state, and then upon returning home, you realize that it was just boring. Immanuel Kant saw in bored slowness a diminution, a degradation of life. overcoming such a hypochondriac state is possible in expedient work and in the organizing rhythm and activity. But again, routine, repetition, Kant's famous works strictly by the clock. He was very, very pedantic man, very pedantic philosopher, And for him it was an antidote, but the question here is, what is the center, the logos of the movement, since a feverish change of activity will not bring relief. Absolutely. Martin Heidegger also notices this. You cannot escape from boredom by activity, for the sake of activity as such. It's impossible. This can only slow down perception, but it's not a remedy. It's not a good method. Returning to Brodsky, the cliché is the opposite of art, And in other words, creative activity corresponding to the nature of this human being, of this person, and inclination of a given individual can be a cure. So, perception of art, perception of beauty, perception of philosophy and literature. Could it be a remedy? For me, of course, yes. Yes, I would say yes, absolutely. But here the question is in the ability of perception. And this ability of perception, however, is being brought up. You can improve and you can develop this ability. It's so. Once upon a time, very smart people, by the way, advised me to sum up, to write down all my impressions and thoughts in a special notebook from a novel I read, a poem, a symphony I listened, an exhibition I viewed. And to tell the truth, I don't always follow, by the way, very good and very reasonable advice. But periodically, yes, I write these notes, and I have a lot of notes nowadays. And that's partly why all these actions videos arose. And while I was studying these essays, these materials about boredom and writing all this stuff and reading all these theses, several hours slipped by unnoticed, and it's a very good sense, very good feeling. Although I don't mind, of course, being bored, sometimes it's not so bad for me. Okay, thank you for your attention. I wish you all the best, be happy, and see you the next video. Bye.